Addictions touch even the best Christian families right here in San Diego. This is Recovery Radio San Diego with Todd Cunningham of Pacific Hills Treatment Center and Recovery Options Network, along with John and Leslie Savage on KPRZ weekdays at 6:30. Stay with us for real-life stories, help from Christian experts, what works and what doesn't work, and local area resources for you and your family. Welcome to Recovery Radio San Diego.
Good evening. You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is a brand new radio program about addictions and self-destructive behaviors and God's gift of recovery. Welcome to Recovery Radio. My name is John Savage, and I am a grateful recovering addict. I'm one of 3 members of this new local San Diego ministry. Recovery Radio is a daily program heard Monday through Friday at this time. And our sole mission is to assist addicts and their families by providing local, professional resources to get them the help they need to live a healthy and productive life. I believe that man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And to do that, you must first surrender from your destructive behaviors, seek forgiveness, and acknowledge what Christ did for you on the cross. From there, that's where my freedom began. Others involved in this ministry is my wife, Leslie, who throughout my period of drug abuse and now through my recovery has stuck by me, and I'm very thankful for her to that. Our third partner in the program is Todd Cunningham. His role with Recovery Radio is to work with those seeking to change their lives through recovery. He especially enjoys working with the family members and helping them make decisions to improve their lives. And at any time during this program, or throughout the day, or this weekend, please write this telephone number down. And this is Todd's telephone number, 24/7. You can get a hold of Todd to talk about recovery, the steps of recovery. If you know someone who is struggling out there with a destructive behavior, you can give him a call at 949-973-9140. That's 949-973-9140. That's Todd Cunningham with a company called Recovery Options. He also would like to talk to you about a scholarship program. If you are seeking treatment, and you want to know what the parameters are of treatment and how it all comes together and the financial part of it, we do have scholarship programs for those who are looking to start their life over again and get on the road of sobriety. Todd can put the pieces together for you and make this happen. You can give him a call at 949-973-9140. If you're a local San Diego church or a business seeking help for a person in your congregation or perhaps an employee in your company, you'd like to hear about our matching one-for-one grants that we have available through Recovery Options, call that telephone number, area code 949-973-9140. You know, my recovery journey began for me on May 1st in 2007, over 3 years ago, and I finally surrendered and met God. I was locked up in a Tijuana jail cell when I finally came to terms that my life was out of control. But for 2 years leading up to that day, I had been abusing prescription medications, which quickly led to just a terrible OxyContin habit, along with cocaine. And my turning point was that arrest in Tijuana, and when I completely surrendered and admitted that my life was completely unmanageable, and at the time I was powerless over my behavior. And over the last 3 years, I have a renewed purpose in my life, and this radio ministry is one of those purposes, and I'm very thankful to be reunited with my family and here today to talk about recovery. You know, this radio program is about recovery from self-destructive behaviors like alcohol, chemical dependencies such as prescription medication abuse and or narcotics. It's also a program about reconciliation and God's plan for your life. But you always need that first step to get into treatment. And one of those steps is through the process of an intervention that many family members successfully use to get their loved one into treatment. And today we have on the phone Keith Hankinson with Hankinson Intervention. Keith, how are you?
Good. Good to be here today again.
Yeah, I'm glad that you could make it back because we believe it's very important for that first step is to get into treatment or at least get into a detox center. And so your company, you and your son, Shane, do interventions throughout the United States. And yesterday afternoon, we were talking about success rates. Not that we want to tout that, but basically, if you go through a professional interventionist, 9 out of 10 times, that loved one is going to walk into treatment. So before we get started, let's do a reintroduction of your business, and we'll just kind of pick up where we left off yesterday afternoon.
Okay, so Hankinson Intervention, we cover all 50 states and other countries. We help families to pull a team of people together, 8 to 12, family and friends, people who are willing to speak love into that person's life, people who would be very sad if they were at a funeral, very sad if they had to visit that person in imprisonment, people who are willing to interrupt and say no more. You know, John, remember the actor Carroll O'Connor in California? He lost his son to an alcohol and drug overdose, and in the last year of his life, he did that series of commercials where he got right into the face of the camera and said, families, parents, loved ones, do whatever you have to do to get in between your child and their drug or alcohol use. And you see, that's what an intervention is. It's a team of people that are saying no more. We're gonna stand right now, starting today. We're going to get in between you and that destructive, high-risk behavior, whether it's a behavior like gambling or eating disorders, or whether it's a substance, alcohol or drugs. But starting today, we're going to interrupt. We're going to say no more. We love you too much to let you go further downhill. We love you too much to just sit passively by and watch you choose those self-destructive behaviors. Starting today, we're interrupting. We're standing in between you and that self-destructive, chronic, progressive pattern in your life that's going to lead to death or imprisonment. We can't allow that. We won't allow it. And
you got into this field many years ago. You, if I remember correctly, you were a youth pastor at a church, but you began to see this as an issue, and it led you into this field because you've been in it for many years. Talk about your history and your son, Shane.
Sure. Well, actually, I was in youth ministry, but I wasn't in a church. I was in a para church where it was a youth organization in the community of the Minneapolis suburbs, out in the western suburbs. And I saw students struggling. You know, they would come to Bible studies. They would come to retreats and camps. They would commit their life to Christ. They wanted to stop smoking pot. They wanted to stop drinking, but they just kept struggling. And then I was introduced to the whole intervention process at the Johnson Institute in 1975, and I started to do interventions, and I started watching kids get well because they went into some either intensive counseling programs or residential programs. And then after 12 years of being in youth ministry, I became a therapist as an alcohol and drug counselor and family counselor. And again, I would watch clients come, and they would come week after week, and they would work hard in an hour session. They would go out committed to maintain sobriety or to stop the destructive patterns of, say, sexual addiction or gambling or drinking and drugging. And then they'd come back a week or two later defeated because they did not have the skills or the tools to do recovery. And no matter which counselor they would have seen, they still would have been struggling. And so I became familiar with some of the Christian staffed treatment centers around the country, and I started to encourage some of my clients to trust God for finances, to trust God for time off work. And I watched those folks come back, and they were just giants in recovery. Now, yes, they were young in recovery, but they had so many skills that I could not teach them on a once-a-week basis or 2 times a month. And their metaphoric tool bag was filled with wonderful skills of Bible knowledge and knowledge about emotional management and what to do with the pain and trauma. And they had gone through grief counseling, and they had worked on trauma in their lives, and they had just done such good work in that residential treatment center that was a foundation of recovery that then I could start to pick up at that point and be an encouraging counselor and accountability person in their life. And so at that point, I became a firm believer in not only the intervention process, but became a firm believer in the full 28 or 30-day residential programs.
Your intervention, let's quickly talk about how the intervention process works, and then I'd like to know the types of interventions that you've done in the past.
Sure.
Because you had mentioned earlier, you had mentioned gambling and food addiction. So let's kind of talk about the types of problems that are out there and the type and your intervention process.
Sure. Well, the intervention process can be used for pretty much any pattern of human behavior where a person is stuck, they're feeling powerless, they're feeling hopeless. It doesn't really matter what the substance is that they ingest or the behavior, the compulsive addictive behavior that they do. And the important thing to stop that process in their life usually takes a group of family and friends to step in and say, no more, we love you too much. And so that's where the modern movement of modern intervention has become so helpful. And in fact, it's becoming almost a household concept now, John, because of the reality TV show on intervention on the A&E channel.
Right.
It's like is validating that this isn't some hocus pocus. This isn't a weird process. This is a very culturally acceptable way to stop an addictive process in a person's life. And so I've been doing it since 1975. Between my son and I, Shane, we have probably done well over 1,200 of these. And so we've become just such a firm believer. I think one reason they're so successful, John, is because it does follow biblical principles. I believe a modern intervention really goes along the principles of Matthew 18, where we see that brother that sins against us, that brother or sister, and they're sinning against themselves and against us, meaning family and the body of Christ, and we say, stop, get help, you're too valuable to live this way, and they blow us off. And so then the mandate there is to go get 2 or 3 as witnesses. And why would Jesus have asked us to bring 2 or 3? Well, it's a brief teaching, but what I see in that is with 2 or 3 now there's more accountability, there's more love, there's more people speaking truth into that person's life. And then the passage goes on to say, and if he doesn't listen to then bring it before the whole congregation. Well, we didn't have our big mega churches back in the days of the early church, but we had community groups. And so how powerful to bring that person's life to the attention of that body of Christ that loved them dearly. And so maybe it's 10 people, 12 people. And I believe that's why the intervention process is so successful, because you follow that process.
How can people get in touch with you if they'd like to hear more about your services?
Well, Shane and I are based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We'll travel to any place in the United States, Alaska, Canada, Hawaii, other countries. We're based out of Atlanta, and our phone number is 770-207-5881, 770-207-5881. And if anybody calls, there's no cost. We'll spend a lot of time on the phone with them, encouraging them to trust God to do this intervention process in the life of the person that they're very concerned about.
You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. The voice you hear is that of Keith Hankinson with Hankinson Interventions. He was based out of Atlanta, but in reality, he just told us he can be anywhere to work with families to help their loved one get into treatment. So talk to me about the different types of interventions that you and your son have done in the past. I mean, my issues were of alcohol and drug abuse, but you mentioned gambling earlier. What other types of interventions have you done?
Sure. We will get involved with interrupting or intervening in any form of addictive substances like alcohol, drugs. We will help a family stop the process of compulsive gambling, compulsive sexual choices, or sex addiction. Most men relate to the model or the label of sex addiction, but some women relate to the model of love and romance addiction, where they go from one toxic, dangerous relationship to another. And so we have done interventions with love and romance addiction. We will help a family intervene with a loved one who's struggling with an eating disorder. Perhaps it's anorexia or bulimia, or where it goes back and forth between anorexia and bulimia. Or perhaps it's a loved one who's extremely obese. I've helped men and women get into treatment centers that have been 450 pounds. And God love those folks. They did not know how to interrupt that pattern of compulsive, disordered eating in their life. And so we help those folks get help. We can also intervene on different forms of mental illness, like depression or manic depressive illness, bipolar. We can also interrupt if a teenager has run away from home, and we can do an intervention to get that young person into a place of treatment, and so that they can eventually be reconciled back to their families. So pretty much it's any pattern of human behavior where someone is stuck and feeling hopeless and powerless, where they're in a dangerous, vulnerable situation, where their life is threatened, or their health, or their marriage, their job.
Hey, do you work with, over the years, have you found yourself working with certain church ministries out there throughout the United States? I mean, do you have like a list of clients?
Yes, we get referrals sometimes from counseling agencies within churches or counseling departments. We get referrals sometimes from leadership with the Celebrate Recovery groups. We also get referrals, of course, from Christian treatment centers around the country. We get referrals from Christian psychologists and alcohol and drug counselors because, like myself, some of those clinicians often experience that person is not going to truly be free unless they do some of that intensive work that a 30-day residential program can give them.
So you're always, if I understand, you're right, you're pretty much, when someone is in and stuck in this behavior, it is best for them to go into a 28 or 30-day residential program. I mean, that's typically the way it goes. Is that correct?
Well, see, that to me, that's the best way to approach the problem head-on, because people who try to do it with just AA or NA or a support group at their church or counseling once a month or a couple times a month, they mean well, but to me, the whole of addiction, John, has been dug so deep by that time that these other attempts are almost like Band-Aids. See, years ago, before modern treatment, folks only had AA. So if we went back to the 1950s, that was very rare that there would be any treatment programs available. In fact, the Minneapolis-St. Paul area I came from originally, before I moved to Georgia, had some hospitals in those early years of addiction medicine for treatment. But most of the country where people would just attend a 12-step meeting, and they would struggle and struggle. And so now, all these years later, we have these wonderful 30-day programs that can accelerate healing so much quicker, and the healing can have such a high quality. You know, if we went to AA today, different meetings all over the country, and talked to people who had 5-year medallions and 10-year medallions, and talk to their wives or girlfriends, we may find that, yeah, they're sober, but I mean, they're clean and they're dry from alcohol. They've lived for 5 or 10 years with abstinence from alcohol or drugs, but their life is not happy. They're more depressed than before they were stopped drinking. The spiritual dimension of their life is real fuzzy and real gray. And see, sobriety, of course, as you know, John, is a quality of the heart and the mind and the spirit. True sobriety is that you're unstuck from these troubling issues. You've dealt with your grief issues. You've dealt with rage and anger issues and resentments and disappointments, and you've climbed out of that pit of despair, and you're facing into life's problems and solving things. And so sobriety as a quality and way of life is so much different than just dryness or abstinence from a substance or behavior. And also, when a person is just abstinent versus sober, that's just often a setup to relapse and go back to that same pattern of behavior.
You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is Recovery Radio for San Diego. If you'd like to get in touch with Keith Hankinson, you can do so to hear about his services and how he may be able to help you with a situation, or just to talk. I mean, you'll do these consultations for free, isn't that right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And then you had mentioned you have your own scholarship program. You know, there are a lot of people out there struggling in this current economy, and it's very nice of you. I know you brought it up yesterday. I'm going to bring it up again. You do have a scholarship program for those who actually want to take that step and maybe get in and utilize your services. But the first step would be to make that call to you, and you can do that by calling area code 770-207-5881. That's 770-207-5881. This is 1210 AM KPRZ. You're listening to Recovery Radio. So when you make that intervention process, you get the nod from the person struggling that they do have a problem and they're ready to take that first step, which would be into most likely a 28-day program. Sometimes they need to go into detox first. Is that correct?
That's right, especially, of course, if it's if, like, for example, with alcohol, more people die detoxing from alcohol every year than all the other drugs combined, because alcohol is one of the most dangerous ones to quit on your own. And so with somebody wanting to come off alcohol, you have to be careful that based upon the quantity and frequency that they don't just try to quit on their own. And, you know, some well-meaning pastors and lay people in churches oftentimes give an alcoholic a very poor counsel to ask them to quit drinking. And they'll ask them to quit drinking and encourage them and support them to stop drinking, but they never ask or have the awareness to ask what quantity they had been drinking, what frequency, what potency. Were they drinking beer or were they drinking whiskey or vodka, you see? And so often a person does need detox, number one, for being able to safely come off the alcohol and the drugs with medical attention. Now, even with drugs like cocaine and methamphetamine and heroin, you can't die coming down off those drugs, but life is very miserable. You might want to die, you see. And so there again, modern detox is wonderful because it's safe. There's medical people there. There's a nursing staff. There's a consulting physician. The vital signs are taken. And a person can feel very safe to start to come off their drugs when there's agitation and stress and anxiety. There's someone to help them talk through that. They can receive a medication that's non-addictive to help them ease off that strong anxiety that they were maybe using the street drugs to deal with. And so a lot of people do, John, have to go through a detox process first. Often it's around 3 to 5 days for the alcohol withdrawal and maybe 5 to 10 days with the narcotics.
You know, I got to say this. It's just on my heart to say, because I can absolutely relate to what you were just talking about, especially when it came to the opiates, because I, too, was addicted to the opiates and cocaine. And the biggest fear in my life at the time was running out of drugs. And I'm sure you hear that every day in your business.
That's right.
And I got to tell you, if you're out there listening to this radio program and you're ready to make a change in your life, just know that it can be done in a very safe environment. And there are professionals out there, professionals that can put you in touch with detox centers. We had Richard Perlin on a few weeks ago. Richard has very successful detox centers up in the Orange County area to get you off these drugs safely. Because I know it was a big fear in my life, was absolutely running out. And that feeling that you get is just heart-wrenching. And so, you know, my prayer for you is that you pick up the phone. If you want to pick up the phone and start that conversation with Keith, you can do that right now by calling area code 770-207-5881. And you'll talk to, I mean, if it's an addict calling you, you'll still talk to them, Keith. But if you're a family member and you think you want to make a change in your loved one's life through an intervention, you can pick up the phone and talk to Keith or his son Shane Hankinson. They are based out of Atlanta, but they go all over the United States, as we've heard. You even mentioned that you'll go out of the country. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done too much international work, John, but I think we've been in 13 countries. So obviously most of our work is within the 50 United States.
Yeah. Well, listen, you do have a financial program that you're willing to talk to them about, and what I mean by that is that with everybody struggling in today's environment, you'll work with these people to get them the help that they are seeking. Is that correct? That's
correct, John. You know, like you say, the economy is really slow right now. There's unemployment. We don't want finances to prevent families from getting their loved ones help, and so we try to bend over backwards to get good prices with travel, airline, and hotels and rental cars. We will often write off part of our professional fee. We will work with people with a barter system of maybe they have something of value. We'll help them. Maybe one of their friends or loved ones could put an airline ticket on a credit card, or maybe they need a payment plan. So we just try to be very creative with how a person can afford to get that loved one the help that they deserve.
Well, we appreciate your time. Will you come back tomorrow afternoon? We'll kind of pick this up and keep talking about intervention. At least that's the first step, isn't it?
Yes, it sure is. I would be glad to be back tomorrow.
Well, very good. You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is Recovery Radio. If you'd like to send us a note, send it to recoveryradiosd recoveryradiosd@gmail.com. That's recoveryradiosd@gmail.com. If you'd like to talk to Todd up at Recovery Options, he was not a part of our program today, but he's available to talk to you about your addiction or put you in touch through Keith or Shane or some of the other people that have been on the show over the last couple of weeks. You can do so by calling area code 949-973-9140. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Recovery Radio for San Diego on 1210 a.m. KPRZ.
Addictions touch even the best Christian families right here in San Diego. This is Recovery Radio San Diego with Todd Cunningham of Pacific Hills Treatment Center and Recovery Options Network, along with John and Leslie Savage on KPRZ weekdays at 6:30. Stay with us for real-life stories, help from Christian experts, what works and what doesn't work, and local area resources for you and your family. Welcome to Recovery Radio San Diego.